Hello everyone. Today I will explain in more detail how the mythologies of the god of war work.
So is this a continuation of the Kratos we've already played as, or is this a new incarnation? Are you talking about that yet?
Continuation.
Okay.
So it is like the way I kind of see the mythologies is kind of like that Hubble telescope image of all of the galaxies.
The
right?
ultra deep field.
Yeah. So that image shows the universe with all of its individual galaxies. Each galaxy is kind of like a representation of a mythology, and sort of wrap that around the Earth. And at any given moment, all of these mythological belief systems existed. They all deal with a creation myth around their region. It's just separated by geography. So that while the height of some of these...
That is, Cory Barlog bluntly says that these mythologies are like galaxies from the Hubble telescope. And he is talking about galaxies because he brings our Hubble telescope, and he says that these galaxies represent their own world, their own mythology, and he directly explains this, and inside these galaxies there is a universe. Now let's move on to the posts. Matthew Soff says that every interpretation of mythology is true, and that every god created his universe in his mythology, and that every mythology has its geographical version of the world of its world, and that the interpretations are true that every god created his universe in his mythology. And Cory Barlog confirmed in his post that each god created his own universe, and everything that was said in the interview is based on belief systems and different cultures. That is, each person represents his own world, and he is in his own world and in his own universe, and all this is based on a belief system and different cultures, as explained to us Cory Barlog, so the mythologies are different. By Instagram way, here's a scan of the fact that this is the official Instagram of Cory Barlog, so all the answers from the Instagram posts are official. Now let's move on to the stupid argument of the Kratos haters who like to use interviews where Cory Barlog allegedly says that the god of war is limited to the planet. But this is not the case. The Kratos haters cannot properly understand the context of this interview. But let's listen to it in full and see what Cory Barlog means here, and that the god of war is not limited to planets.
Developers wanted more of the lore background. There is a Bible somewhere that says, like, all right, around this area is when this mythology bubbled up, and so therefore it exists.
Yeah, we have it fairly closely guarded in the sense that there are a few people that have it, but we don't want to have too many people starting to dig into other areas. But to keep everything consistent, we have that fantastic timeline that helps everybody understand.
Is it important with this entry to hint much more at that larger world, just to excite fans in a Force Awakens style way of like, oh, just think about all the stories they could tell? Is that a main drive, or is this solely focused on, we just want to tell the Norse story?
It's both, actually. I think it is focusing on the Norse story, but it also is showing that high concept that all of the mythologies exist on this planet simultaneously. They're all creation stories that date all the way back to the beginnings of the planet itself, but these are the culture's sort of creation story of that culture. But they are sort of simultaneously coming up in different geographic locations on the Earth, and somebody moving between all of those in a time when it was far more about the gods wandering the Earth, is connecting all this.
Do you consider in the God of War mythology, are these mythologies sprouting out because people believe in them, or are they sprouting up independent from humans?
I think it's independent.
Okay.
But I think there is a power of the belief as well that continues on it, right? It's maybe a little bit of that Sam Neill Merlin movie, right? Where everybody decides to forget magic and stop believing in it, and it goes away. There is a sense that in our world, the Norse gods existed far before the Viking times, right? So that basically there's all this talk in the era of the Vikings of the Vikings fighting for Odin and Thor and Freya, but they were abandoned by these gods because they're not around, right? But they were around long before, in a time when it was far more barren in Northern Europe. And basically, that's our time, right? Our time in which they are connecting. But, in Egypt, the pharaohs were sort of the living embodiment of the gods during a time when it was very crowded for humans. So there's an interesting sort of connection with each mythology. It's slightly different, right? It's slightly different in which their creation story comes.
As we can see here, Cory Barlog is not saying that the world of the god of war is limited only by the planet here. Cory Barlog is talking about the timeline that they created in the Scandinavian land, specifically in Scandinavian mythology, and in the Scandinavian planet, specifically in the Scandinavian world. Now let's move on to another dumb argument, and to the fact that Kratos got to Egypt through a boat, but this is not the case. He got to Egypt through the prayers of people who wanted Kratos to come and save them, and it was people who moved him to the Egyptian world. And the comic about Egypt does not relate to the original story of the god of war, so that comic about Egypt can be ignored. Now let's move on to Bruno. Many people use Bruno as an argument, but Bruno is just unreliable. Bruno always contradicts himself and the game. He says that Thanatos is not the original when the game itself says that Thanatos is the original and existed when there were no concepts of time and space. That is, we see contradictions in Bruno's words, which in itself suggests that Bruno does not know the game God of War, and Bruno contradicts himself and the game. And believe me, there are many contradictions. And Bruno doesn't know the cosmology of the word at all, as he says that Kratos is 0D when by itself all the anime characters and the game are 3D, and Kratos was inspired by time and space abilities. And De Bruno himself says that he does not know the cosmology of the God of War, that one should not rely on Bruno's words. And Bruno also says that the screenwriters know cosmology, and Bruno doesn't know the God of War and cosmology. And if many Kratos haters use Bruno's words to understate the God of War, then why don't they take into account where Bruno overestimates the God of War? Here is an example. Here is an example where Bruno says that Greek mythology is the whole universe, or that Scandinavian mythology created its own universe. And so I proved why Bruno is not canon. And even if you use Bruno's words, then use only those that do not contradict the game, in which Bruno does not contradict himself. And that's it. And he proved why mythologies have other universes.